Hi, I'd like you to meet someone. It's this little orange guy right here. His name is Jello, and he's the main character of a game I'm working on with a couple of my friends. It's a 2D physics-based platformer with unique controls. In Jello you can jump like so, roll around, and swing. I'd like to share with you the process of making Jello, some challenges that I faced and lessons that I learned from them, some systems that I had to build and other things. But first, I want to start it all off by going all the way back, 5 years ago. I was fresh out of high school and looking for a university. I didn't really know what to do, but luckily a friend of mine went to Netherlands a few years back, to a place where they taught you how to make games. I didn't believe it at first. I didn't believe such a place exists. But I looked into it and really, they didn't just play games or study games. They actually taught how to make games. I applied to an indie program, so I had to do the tests for all the 3 disciplines: artists, designers, and programmers. The most important one for me was the programming test, where we had to make a game in C++. I was not a very experienced programmer. I just visited a few courses, so I knew how to make some programs in the console, to do a bubble sort or things of that sort. I have never made a real game, and I didn't know where to start. I asked my teachers, how do I put a pixel on a screen? How can I put an image there? And they didn't give me a good answer. I knew about DirectX and OpenGL, but that was way too complex to get in at the start. Eventually, I found this thing called SDL2. It's a pretty simple framework that literally just lets you put rectangles on the screen. I found tutorials by a guy called Lazy Foo, and they helped me a lot to get started. They explained the basic principle of a game loop, but from there I was basically on my own. The theme of the game had to be jelly, but gameplay could be anything you wanted. In a skateboarding game I was playing at the time, Ollie Ollie 2, to make a jump, you had to pull a stick and release it. I really liked this tactile feel of pulling a stick and releasing it, but I thought I could aim it in any other direction and use it more like some other mobile games. My basic idea was to have a bunch of squares attached to each other with springs. I looked up a spring formula and somehow put it in my game. F equals minus kx. I just did it frame by frame and it seemed to work out. But I made one crucial mistake. I didn't use vectors. In programming, a vector is a direction or a position. It can have in 2D an x and y. But I didn't use that. I just had a separate formula for x and a separate for y. That is why Jello doesn't just fall down, it stays upright. So isn't it amazing how the core physics of my game are based on a mistake I made? And this should really show you that if you don't really know how to properly make something, how to properly code something, you don't know how physics really work or how physics work in games, it shouldn't stop you from making a game. You can know absolutely nothing, just look up a formula in a book and make up your own version of it. The only thing that matters is that the game works and that it is fun. It wasn't really fun at the start. It was a big blob. But eventually I tweaked my variables, I changed up a bunch of really random things in code, I just pushed them around until it sort of worked like I wanted it to, and I got a Jello. It was pretty simple, didn't have any fancy graphics, it was just a cube that could jump around. But I could really see that it's the start of something much bigger. I can make a really awesome game out of this. I had a few final days to make some levels. It was a really primitive game that really no one but me could play. But even then, some people liked watching me play, and that gave me a rush. I really wanted to make a new version of the game, but much better. However, I had to put it on a shelf for a while. I was studying in university, and during the 4 years there, I actually realized how to write proper code, how to make games, how the physics work in games. And I could use that knowledge to come back at the end of my studies and understand what exactly did I do so wrong, yet so right. I started Jello from scratch. This time I chose Unity, and I actually knew what I was doing. I laid a pretty good foundation, I looked at my old code, and I didn't really change it, but I cleaned it up, I made it work with Unity's physics system, and I went from there. Initially, the Unity prototype looked not that different from the first one, but the thing is, I didn't stop working on it. I've been working on it ever since. Now I have some friends that are helping me, we're working on new art, new features, but all of that would be way too big of a story to tell in one video. So I'd like to invite you to subscribe and join me in the next video, when I'll show you how the game went from this to this.